that pertain to Asia in particular, and one of them is pu'er tea. And I don't know if you drink that in India. It's a very expensive tea that's produced in China, and they use an Aspergillus niger-like fungus to produce this tea. And in the last 10 to 15 years, we've come to realize that some strains of Aspergillus niger produce these toxins, these mycotoxins. But the strains that are used to make this tea don't make these mycotoxins. So maybe it's better not to call them Aspergillus niger, and make things a bit simpler. And so this fungus is now known as Aspergillus acidus. And the last nice thing about Aspergillus is this compound. Aspergillus terreus, it means the aspergillus of the soil, or the sandy aspergillus for the color, and makes this compound called lovastatin. If I was in America, I would ask people in the audience whether any of them were taking statins, but that probably would be impolite here. I am not taking statins. I have heart disease in my family. I certainly will be taking statins. This is a drug that in the last 20 years has made, I think the annual sales are $12 billion in the world. And it's being used by a lot of people. And it originally came from this fungus collected from soil on a golf course in Wisconsin. So the second fungus that changed the world is quite closely related to Aspergillus, and this would be no surprise, is penicillium. This is penicillium growing on an orange. All the green color is spores. So penicillium is all about spores. It just goes crazy no matter where it is. If there's a bit of sugar around, it's going to make spores. And on one of those oranges, this is about a week, that shot, would be 4 to 5 billion spores per orange. So on those 2 oranges, there's a spore for everybody in the world. Of course, penicillium is famous for this compound as penicillin, and this is one of the classical molecular models of penicillin. And of course, this was discovered by Alexander H. Fleming, and we're fortunate that we actually have video of Fleming. He, of course, you know the story. He worked in St. Mary's Hospital. He had a contaminated petri dish. There was fungus there. The bacteria started growing. People think that this was an accident. A lot of people don't give Fleming a lot of credit for making a scientific discovery. They think he was lucky. That's not actually true. Fleming was a surgeon's assistant during the First World War, and he was in the field in the First World War, and he saw a lot of pain and suffering in the soldiers who'd been wounded. So when he returned, he was a doctor, but when he returned, he started doing research looking for ways to kill bacteria, and he knew that the enzyme in tears would kill bacteria. So we have lysozyme in our tears. And so he was looking for a microbial source of lysozyme. And so his mind was tuned. He was looking for something that killed bacteria. So this was not luck. This was, he deserves the credit that he got for it. And this is St. Mary's Hospital where it happened in London. And this happened, the same hospital is where the royal family has all of their babies. So every now and then you see that the St. Mary's Hospital on television. And there's a little plaque there above the room where he did this. And he had basically a laboratory under the stairs. This wasn't big science. It was hardly room for 2 people to stand up in that lab. He became a hero for many people. He was really almost worshipped as a savior of mankind. And so as you go around the world, he won the Nobel Prize. That's what this shows. As you go around the world, there are monuments to him all over the place. And maybe the most amazing one is in Madrid. There's a monument to Fleming established by the bullfighters of Madrid, because they so often got very serious wounds from the bulls, and they often died because of infections, and when penicillin came along, they didn't die anymore. There's this very interesting book called The Mold in Dr. Florey's Coat, and this tells the other part of the story of penicillin. Fleming made the discovery. Florey and Chain were two chemists in Oxford who took the discovery, did the chemistry, tried to figure out how to turn it into a drug. And the title comes from, this work was being done during the Second World War. The title comes from the fact that at the end of every day, Dr. Florey would go to the culture, take a brush, and paint some spores on the inside of his jacket. In case the Germans bombed that night and destroyed the lab, they would still have the penicillin fungus. So they tried all kinds of things to make penicillin work. The cultures made it in relatively small amounts. It's very difficult. And because of the war, they moved a lot of the work to Peoria in the United States. It's in the Corn Belt and the Maize Belt in the United States. And Fleming was horrified because the Americans wanted to patent penicillin, and he didn't want that. He wanted penicillin to be for all of mankind. There was a technician in the lab, and her name was Mary Robertson, but they called her Moldy Mary because Moldy Mary would go to the fruit market every week and look for decaying vegetables and decaying fruit, and she would bring it back to the lab and isolate penicillium, hoping to find a new strain that would make more penicillin, and she did. From a moldy cantaloupe in the Peoria Farmers Market, she got the strain that is still making penicillin for the world. Although it's been, of course, it's genetically modified and it's chemically modified after it's produced. But so Fleming is buried in St. Paul's Cathedral, and if you are interested, the next time you're in London, you can go down in the basement and you can find his crypt. Now, there's a dark side to penicillin, of course, and I'm sure you've heard this, and that's drug resistance. Bacteria are becoming resistant to penicillin, and there's a great search on for ways to get around this. But the most important thing to remember is that because of penicillin and other antibiotics, human lifespan extended by 15 years on average. That's amazing. This was 60 or 70 years ago. And 2 weeks ago I met a man in Canada, but he was born in Guyana in South America. And he was the first penicillin patient in Guyana. He was a child, he was 12 years old, and he had a bone infection. And they injected the penicillin into his leg, and it saved his leg. So these first patients, there's not many of them left, but it's very sobering to remember how the world has changed in that amount of time. So the third fungus I'd like to talk about is cordyceps. And cordyceps has got a kind of macabre, strange, mysterious reputation as a zombie fungus. And I'll show you why. So this is from David Attenborough's Planet Earth. And this poor ant has been infected with cordyceps, and the cordyceps takes over the animal's brain, and it says, must find the sun, must find the sun, climb, climb. And so this ant has climbed up, and this is what happens. This fungus is popping out of the back of its head, making this long structure so that it can get its spores out into the wind. So this kind of thing excites a lot of the imagination for people who have an interest in the mysterious and the strange. But there's a lot of cordyceps species. This is still also from Planet Earth. This film was done by a mycologist that's a friend of mine named Harry Evans. And very striking, beautiful fungi. I just whip through a few pictures here. I mean, they're really quite amazing. And the Japanese in particular have really been excited by the aesthetic appeal of these fungi. And